This is the Taking the Land podcast. We post daily sermons and weekly interviews to inspire, convict, equip, and encourage you to take the land that God has set in front of you. Today is Next Gen Friday. We are so excited about the deep bench of preachers and men of God rising up in our fellowship. You might not have heard from these preachers outside of a farewell service, but God is developing another generation of pastors on fire for God. The premium version of this episode is released before you wake up each morning and does not include any interruptions or ads. Check the show notes to find out how to subscribe to the premium version of the Taking the Land podcast. Enjoy the Next Gen Friday on the Taking the Land podcast.
So I'm excited about this message, and I'm talking about decisions. This one is entitled Diligent Decision Making. Diligent as in being consistent, diligent as in being faithful, understanding the importance of making decisions. We're going to look at Daniel chapter 1 in a few moments, but I want to kind of lay the groundwork for what I'm talking about. What do you think it is that makes the difference in someone's life where, you know people who appear to be very fulfilled, people who seem to have things in order in their lives, people who have meaningful relationships, people who are strong financially, people who are generous with others, people who have powerful ministries, people who love their lives, and then, the rest of the world who doesn't, right? What's the difference between people who seem to have their life in order and people who are still scrambling and still struggling? What's the difference? I want to tell you, first of all, what it's not. It's not their talents, because we tend to say, it's just different for them because they're talented. It's not their money. That's an easy one. We like to say, they just got money. That's why things are in order in their life. That's not the answer. It's not because of money. It's not even because of their knowledge or their intellect or their IQ. Again, we do that. We say, they're just smarter. It's not because of that. It's not even because of the people they know. It does help to know people, but whether or not we are successful and we have this kind of meaningful life doesn't hinge on whether or not we know the right people. Because we've all seen talented people who are miserable. We've all seen smart people who are absolutely broke. Right? So we know that these traits don't guarantee a meaningful life. What's the difference? What sets these people apart is they have learned the importance of making quality decisions in their lives. They've learned the importance of decisions because decisions shape direction. Decisions shape where we're going in life. And not only have they come to understand the importance of making quality decisions, but many, many times they make those decisions in advance. Before they're even in a situation where they have to decide, they've already decided in a private time of prayer, when they're just reflecting on their life and where they want to go, they've already decided what they believe in and where they want to end up. So they've made some decisions beforehand so that when the time comes, they're already ready. They know what they want to do. They have pre-decided, if you will. They've decided in advance how they're going to live. And again, if you see a meaningful life in these people, then that means they've made decisions that are God-honoring decisions. God blesses people who will say, Lord, I want to give you my life, and so I'm going to make decisions that contribute to that. I want to live in such a way that it shows that I'm a child of God and I'm moving in a direction that glorifies you, right? So they've made decisions, and they've made decisions that are God-honoring. One of the best spiritual tools that a person can have is to be able to do this. To make decisions beforehand, to decide now what you're going to do later. It's an incredibly important spiritual tool and spiritual discipline. Our lives are made up of moments, moment by moment, and in those moments, we are making decisions all the time. These decisions make an immeasurable impact in our everyday life. And I want to say this. I want to make a couple of statements that I believe are very important. The quality of your decisions determines the quality of your life. The quality of your decisions and they might seem insignificant, but you're making a lot of decisions. The quality of your decisions make up the quality of your life. You make decisions, and then your decisions end up making you. You become the person in years down the road. You become that person because of what you're deciding right now. And what you're dealing with right now is based on what you decided years ago. Our decisions make who we are. Did you ever come to a time in your life and you realized, I'm not a very good decision maker? I'm not very good at this. This isn't one of my skills, I think we've all made impulse purchases that we regret. We go, why did I buy that? What did I do that for? We've all made those, potentially the career decisions that you look back and you go, man, I wish I would have done this, or I wish I would have done that. Or maybe it had to do with how you were in school, or maybe it was relationship decisions where you got into a relationship that ended up hurting you, or you said no to a relationship that now you're like, man, that might have been God's will, or maybe you hurt someone in a relationship, they hurt you. Obviously, this is, we hurt each other, right? But you look back and you say, man, if only I had not said this, or if only I had not done that, I made some mistakes. I think that we all, from time to time, will make bad decisions. I think that it's just a part of being a human being. We fail from time to time, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes we realize that decision changed the course of my life. It made a difference in who I am. I heard a story that I want to share with you. I heard a story of a pastor who said that he had just started as a full-time pastor, and he was still in seminary. So he was a full-time student, and he was a full-time pastor. And he said that he had written a paper for his one of his college classes, and it was like a 15-page paper. It was incredibly important. And he realized that he had accidentally left it in his office. And wherever his office was, he wasn't able to get into it before a certain time. Like it opened at, say, 7, but before that, he couldn't get into it. So he needed to go to his class, but he had to take this paper. And he said, this is before we were able to just email ourselves a paper. There was one copy of it, and it was in his office, and it was locked away. So he worked on like the 4th or 5th story of a building. And he said he never locked his office window because he was like, it's 4 stories up. No one would climb up this high. And then he realized, I could climb up that high. And so he said he started climbing up this building to go get into his office. And he said after a little bit, he all of a sudden realized, I can't go back. Like he couldn't climb backwards. There was no way for him to be able to do that. So he was at a point of no return. And he was like, he's starting to realize this is probably a bad decision. So he's climbing up. He finally gets to his office, and he says he's standing on a ledge that's probably just 6 inches wide. He's standing on a ledge. He goes to open his office window, and it's locked. Someone else had locked his office window. He said he's standing there, and he realized, like, this is a very bad decision. This was a very bad decision. And so he couldn't get in. He couldn't climb down. He just had to stand there. He said this was at like 6:30 in the morning. And he said he just stood there until around 7 when the building opened. Someone did come in, and he saw them walk by his office door, but they couldn't get into his office because his office is locked. And so he said, this is before cell phones. This person had to go find a payphone and call the fire department. And the fire department had to get the pastor down. Oh my gosh, what a bummer. What a bummer. The fire department had to put a ladder up to get him down. So funny that he was like, that's when I realized I was a bad decision maker. And I've definitely been there. Maybe not to that extent, but I've made really dumb decisions that have impacted me, embarrassed others, hurt me, hurt others, bad decisions. And so how do we improve on this? How do we become good decision makers? I believe that it is a skill that we can learn, and I believe that God can help us. And I'm going to tell you right now that it's based on our ability to read and study God's word, to know what his values are, and then again, to make decisions that I'm going to do the right thing, I'm going to be wise, and then when I'm confronted with the problem, I've already decided how I'm going to handle it. We're going to talk about that this morning, and I want to talk about this over the next couple of weeks, where we're going to dig in and learn how to make good decisions biblical decisions that are sound, that are going to contribute to our lives in the way that we want, the way that we want to go and grow. So we're going to read Daniel's story, Daniel chapter 1. Just a real quick recap. What basically is happening here is Nebuchadnezzar has attacked Jerusalem, and the Bible actually says that God allowed him to take over Jerusalem. The Bible even says that God allowed him to go into the temple, and he stole some of the holy items. And it was a very, very bad time for Jerusalem. It was a very bad time for the people of Israel. So Nebuchadnezzar storms Jerusalem, takes the holy items. And then he does something interesting. And Daniel is a fascinating story, and it's a story that I've been wanting to dig into more. We're going to do that a little bit today. I think I'll probably return to his story in the coming weeks. But I want to catch up right here in verse 3, and let's look at what happens. Daniel chapter 1, verse 3. It says, "Then the king ordered Ashpenaz," and when it says king, it's talking about Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. "Select only strong, healthy, and good-looking young men," he said. "Make sure they are well-versed in every branch of learning, are gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon." The king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. They were to be trained for 3 years, and then they would enter the royal service. Verse 6, "Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were 4 of the young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah. The chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar, Hananiah was called Shadrach, Mishael was called Meshach, Azariah was called Abednego. But Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king. He asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable foods." Now, I do need to quickly give you an idea that God had a very strict diet that he had prescribed for the people of Israel. And you can basically look at it and realize that it was more for their health, but it also set them apart from the people in the surrounding nations. So God had made this a command that the people of Israel would eat in a certain way, very strict diet. Obviously, some of them practicing Jews still observe this diet to this day. So it was very important to the people of God. And Daniel, I love how it says he determined. He would not defile himself with the food from the king. So look at what King Nebuchadnezzar does. He goes into he goes into Jerusalem. He takes all these people into Babylon. And the men that he's choosing for his service in his palace are strong, healthy, good-looking. They're well-versed in every branch of learning. They're gifted. They're knowledgeable. They have good judgment. They're suited for the royal palace. So these are excellent young men. Daniel was an excellent young man. But that's not what was able to keep him from defiling himself and sinning against God. He was talented. He was gifted, but that's not what kept him from falling into sin as he goes into Babylon. It wasn't talent. It wasn't good looks. It was him deciding, I will not defile myself as I go into these new surroundings. As I'm influenced by other groups of people, I will not defile myself. He had already made a decision. See, he didn't make that decision in the dining room in Babylon. That's not where you make the decision. Most people will fail in that scenario. He had made that decision well before he ever even arrived in the dining room and was first tempted and approached. This is what sets him apart, is he decided beforehand that he would live for God. And I believe that this is what will set each and every one of us apart. If we make a decision that we say, I'm going to live for Jesus no matter what. I am going to serve Jesus no matter what. And there are some things that I'm deciding right now that I will not engage in, that I will not succumb to. And you make that decision before you're ever even faced with that temptation. And there are also decisions that we make in a good way as well, where we say, I am deciding I will be faithful to read my Bible. I am deciding right now I will be faithful to prayer. I will be faithful to church attendance. I will be a disciple. I'm making decisions right now so that in the future, when there's situations where maybe I don't really want to pray, and maybe I don't really want to read, or maybe I don't really want to go to church, I've already decided this is what I do. I'm a Christian. I'm a child of God. I have already determined in my heart, I will do these things. And of course, there are some things I will not do. I will not engage in, certain sins. I'm deciding now. Now, does this mean that any of us are going to be perfect for the rest of our lives? Of course not. I only say that because I don't want anyone to be condemned when you do make a bad decision, because everyone does. Okay. But what the idea is just, I'm going to do everything I can now to set myself up for success later. I just want to position myself so that I can do the right thing when I'm in a situation that calls on me to make a decision. Daniel, I feel, was the king of predecision because he is in such a difficult situation. He's taken from his home into a foreign country, forced to learn their language, or in other words, forced to speak how they speak. You don't talk like a Christian, you talk like that, right? He's forced to speak the way they speak. He's even given a new name, meaning he's given a new identity. And it just makes me think about, Christians who have a whole nother persona outside of church. Church kids in college, whatever, adults, because it's not like it's just kids, but it's you have a totally different identity in another place. And some of that is forced on you because you're in an area where you don't want to be the odd man out. You don't want to be the weirdo. And so you kind of start to do things the way they do them. And then slowly you start losing your identity of who you are as a child of God. The next thing you know, you're talking the way they talk. You're looking the way that and you're just changing to fit in with a whole different culture. We're children of God. We stand out. That's part of the reason that God did all these things, like with diet, with honoring the Sabbath, the way that they dressed, that God wanted them to be a people who were distinguished. But how many know it can be very difficult to go out in the world and have to be different every day? So some people just kind of change to fit in, and they lose their values, they lose their morals, and they start entering into things that they wouldn't have before, but they slowly slip into it. But see, I just love it that Daniel said, I refuse to slip into that. I refuse to fall into these sins. I will not go down those roads. I will keep my identity as a child of God, as a Christian. Daniel teaches us that no matter what happens to us and no matter what happens around us, we can be faithful. You can stay saved even in a work environment that's very difficult, where there's a lot of pressure to fall in line with them or to compromise your morals or your standards. You can stay saved in college. You can do it. You can stay saved in school. Even in an area where it's very hard, Daniel shows you can do it. You can keep your morals. But it won't happen unless you decide that beforehand. Before you're faced with temptation, before you're starting to get pulled by other people, right away you say, I will not do this. I will not engage in that behavior. I don't do that. I'm a Christian. I'm a child of God. Now, you might ask, how can I make decisions about things that haven't happened? I've not been faced with that temptation. I've not been faced with that challenge. How do I make a decision about something that hasn't happened yet? I believe that the answer is we determine our values. We determine what we believe to be valuable now. And then when we're in situations that test our values, we've already decided. See, you don't decide to keep your purity at a party in college, a raging party there. That's not where you decide. You decide way before then. And maybe you don't go to that party at all because you've already decided, I don't do that. You don't decide that you want to be a person of integrity in the moment that your boss asks you to do something illegal. That's not where you make that decision. You decide way before then. You say, I don't do this or I don't do that. You've made up your mind well before you've ever been faced with that situation. Again, Daniel decided who he was before he ever got into the dining room. He had already made up his mind. So we determine our values, and then our values shape our decisions. When you're confronted, you already know what you're going to do because you've already decided. So why does pre-decision, why does deciding in advance, why is it so difficult? Why is it so hard to live a life where we follow through on those decisions? And I have 3 ideas that I believe are helpful, will help us make good decisions. But I want to touch on something first. I think that the first reason that we don't always pre-decide is maybe some of those delicacies kind of look good. Maybe the king's food and the king's wine, maybe it's a little appealing. Maybe we don't pre-decide because we're sort of open to it. We're sort of like, maybe I'll try it out. Maybe it's not all bad. Maybe it's not so bad. There's something in us that kind of wants to try those delicacies and kind of wants to do the things that the world does. So we're not making good decisions because we're kind of open to it. Those young men who were, again, they were kidnapped. They were forced to learn a new culture, forced to speak a certain way, forced to take on a new identification, a new identity of who you are. I mean, this is like worst case scenario. Worst case scenario. They could have said, I have to eat this way. I'm a slave. I've been captured. I don't have a choice. I have to eat these foods. But they didn't do that. They said, I will not. See, because they can take your identity, they can force you to do this and that, but they can't take your values. They cannot take your values. Who you are as a child of God, they cannot take that from you. They can force you to speak a certain way. They can force you to live in a certain area, whatever. There's all kinds of things that they can force you to do physically, but they cannot take your values. That comes between you and God on decisions that you've made as a child of God. But sometimes we don't pre-decide towards righteousness because we're kind of open to everything else. We're kind of like, maybe I'll try it. Maybe it's not that bad. And it can be all too easy for the world to talk us into bad decisions because we kind of want to be tucked into it. We kind of want to try it. We kind of want to give it a shot. Peer pressure is difficult for young people, but it's also difficult for older people. It's not like, just all of a sudden peer pressure doesn't bother you anymore. Even adults will struggle with this. They want to have friends. They don't want to be alone. They're lonely. They're hurt. They're whatever. And then, they meet some people. It seems like they're having fun. They want to have fun, right? There's nothing bad. And then suddenly their morals are starting to be tested. They're starting to do things they've not done before because of peer pressure. But what I'm trying to say is, if you've already decided on your values, it's not as easy to, make those bad decisions because you've already decided, I'm not going to do that before you're even tempted. And sometimes we just see this in churches and just Christian life. We see people who will start hanging out with someone who is questionable, not a great influence. And you just kind of think, well, I wonder what's going on. Hopefully they're going to influence them more than they influence the Christian, right? You just hope for the best. And then, sometimes you slowly see them start to drift. They start to drift into doing what the world does and doing what their worldly friends do. And what I want to say is, let's just be honest. The truth is they were probably open to that from the get. Because if they weren't, they wouldn't have started hanging out with them. They're probably hanging out with them because they wanted to try it, right? We have to make decisions now that say, I will not engage in these things. I will not. I'm a child of God. The delicacies are not going to, tempt me into giving up my morals and my values. We have to decide beforehand that we want to be pure, that we want to keep our testimony. You can't decide that in the heat of temptation. It's decided beforehand. So now I want to give 3 practical ideas on how, why it's difficult to pre-decide and make diligent decisions in advance. The first thing is, we are overwhelmed with options. We have so many choices that we make. Some studies have shown that we'll make 35,000 decisions in a day. 35,000 decisions. That's crazy. But it's from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep at night. You're constantly being faced with all these different choices, and you're constantly having to choose from the moment you get up. Do I make my coffee first, or do I sleep a little more? Do I get up to pray? Do I not? Do I eat now? Do I eat later? Right? All these things. Do I scroll through Facebook? Do I not? Do I read my YouVersion scripture of the day or not? There's so many decisions from the moment you wake up. You're constantly making all of these choices, and so you could imagine that by the end of the day, you've made 35,000 decisions, and it's difficult to keep making good decisions. What cognitive scientists have done is they've coined a phrase. It's called decision fatigue. And it's like the decision muscle, if you will, in your brain starts to get worn out. And the theory is, and I believe this is true, the idea is with the quantity of decisions going up, the quality of decisions go down. You've made 35,000 decisions you made 34,999 good decisions, and then, that last decision is a bad decision because your decision muscle is worn out. And it's very real. It's been tested in various other research scenarios where they've tested this, and they've found it can be very difficult to make good decisions over a long period of time. So decision fatigue is a very real thing. That's why you can spend all day at work making good decisions, being wise. You're in hard situations and you're wise and you're doing the right thing. But then you go home and you just binge eat a whole carton of ice cream and you eat a whole pizza. Why? Because you had been making good decisions all day and you're worn out and you're tired, and now it's hard to say no. Your decision-making muscle is worn out. Decision fatigue. This is why when you're trying to be good with your finances, you're paying off debt, you're being careful with all your purchases, you're being wise, and then all of a sudden you buy something you should never have bought, and you put it on the credit card. Why did I do that? It's because you've been making a lot of good decisions and you're worn out. It's a real thing. This isn't to excuse, but it's just to understand. When it starts to become difficult to make good decisions, just give yourself a break and say, you know what? It's been a hard day. It's been very difficult. But even like with all these things, it's like the more you decide in advance, the easier it will be to, not give in to those bad decisions. Like if that's your tendency to eat the whole carton of ice cream and the whole pizza, stock your fridge with things that are healthy so that when you're in that moment, you don't make that bad decision, right? But that only happens if you decide beforehand. I'm going to stock my fridge with what's going to be healthy and helpful to me so that when I'm in that moment of decision fatigue, I'm not as likely to cave, right? And obviously you can have ice cream. I'm not saying that, but we just understand what our tendencies are, and we say, I'm going to set myself up for success. That means making a decision in advance. So the more things that we decide in advance, the less decisions we'll have to make on the fly, and the more likely we'll be able to make good decisions throughout our whole day. We also need to pre-decide and make decisions in advance for our kids' sake. We want to teach them how to make good decisions. So that means we have to model good decisions. And that means we have to teach what it means to make good decisions. Teach that our decisions have long-lasting impact that we'll have to deal with in the future. So, we make these decisions and we teach our children to make good decisions. And again, once you've determined your values, the rest of your decisions come a bit easier because you know what you want to do. It's like this with working out, again, eating healthy, financially, not making those impulse purchases. You could say, when I'm in a situation that I really want to buy something, you could say, I've decided right now, I'm going to wait 3 days before I buy that thing. Give yourself a little cushion. If you still want it in 3 days, go ahead, buy it. But don't make that, impulse decision if you know that's what you struggle with. Say, I'm deciding right now, I'm going to give myself a little time. Or like, again, with food, you just decide in advance. This is how I eat. This is what I'm going to do. And, I'm going to set myself up for success financially. All these different areas. The more we decide in advance, we decide what our values are, the easier it is to make good decisions. But the second thing is we let our emotions overrule reality. We make a lot of emotional decisions. And this is something we want to be very careful of, and something, again, that we want to teach our kids not to do, is we want to make sure that we're making decisions sober-mindedly, because sometimes we'll make an emotional decision and it will impact the rest of our lives. And if we had just been sober-minded, we might not have made that decision. So emotions can be a very difficult thing in regard to decision-making. We cannot let our emotions overrule reality. I remember hearing a story about a young man who came to his pastor, and he was like, "Pastor, I feel like I'm doing really good when I'm at work." He said, "I'm witnessing, I'm keeping my cool, I'm a good testimony, I'm having these really good conversations with people. I feel like God is really moving in my life at work." He said, "But then I come home." And he said, "The moment I walk into the door, my wife is angry at me, my kids are freaking out, and it's like I come into a disaster, and then I get angry, and I start making bad decisions, and I start saying things I shouldn't say, and all of that," right? So he says, "What's going on? How can I change this?" And his pastor had a great idea. He said, "Why don't you, on the way home from work, why don't you stop and buy your wife some flowers and walk in the front door with flowers? And basically, you're setting the tone. I am not going to fight tonight. I'm going to make a good decision beforehand so I can contribute to good decisions at home." Or maybe you stop and you pick up food for her, or you stop and you pick up a drink for her. You just do something that says, "I'm going to set the tone. I'm deciding now, before I even walk in the front door, I'm deciding now that I'm going to contribute to a healthy environment, that it's going to be positive and uplifting." And it was a blessing. It helped them. It helped them a lot. You decide in advance, because in the moment of emotions and conflict and all of that back and forth, it's hard to make good decisions right there. It's hard to be careful with our words. This is another thing. We decide, I want to be a kind person. I want to be compassionate. I want to be friendly. And then in the emotional time, we're tested. Are you going to be careful with your words? Are you going to be angry and fly into a rage and be difficult to negotiate with and talk to in those moments? Decisions determine direction. Direction determines destiny. Where you're going, it's shaped by your decisions. And ultimately, your destiny is impacted. I want you to think about this with me. Do you like the decisions that you're making right now? Do you like the quality of your life right now? Just think about it right now. Do you like the way things are going? Or would you prefer that they were different? Then it comes down to, will you change your decisions? Will you be more careful with your decisions? Will you decide now who you will be in times of fighting, struggle, trials, temptation, all of the above? If we want a different life, we have to make different decisions. Decisions based on values, not emotions, not what's trending, not what's popular, not what everyone else is doing, but based on the values that God has put in us. Maybe the quality of your life just really isn't where you would like it to be or what you want it to be. Then it comes down to, will you make decisions to change it? Maybe you look back and you think of some decisions that you've made that you're still dealing with, negative outcomes from it. I believe that we can absolutely give those to God, surrender to Him, repent, just do what we can in the moment, and then just say, "Lord, help me to make good decisions in the future." And God will. And also pray that God can redirect some things, because God can miraculously redirect some things. But I do believe that we've got to make good decisions that I will, live by certain values. Because why would God, redirect everything for us to just make the same bad decisions, right? So we repent. We say, "I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to make good decisions." And then we trust God to begin working things out in our favor. A lesson that many parents teach their children, and I alluded to this earlier, but don't make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions or temporary circumstances. We cannot make lifelong decisions based on our emotions in the moment. Proverbs 16:3 says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans." And this is the final idea. Commit to the Lord all of your life, all of your decisions, whatever you do, and God will establish your plans. So I'm talking everything, relationships. I'm talking career. I'm talking, where you live, where you work, everything. How you raise your kids, how you interact with people. Commit your ways, commit to the Lord, and then God establishes your plans. So we just make that decision. God, I want my life to glorify you. The decisions that I make, I want them to glorify you. I'm going to pray about these things, and I'm not going to make emotional decisions. I'm going to make decisions that honor you, your word, and the values that you've inspired in me. The idea of commit is all about deciding in advance. Lord, I'm committing my life to you, which means I'm committing my decisions, all 35,000 of them every day. I'm committing them to you, Lord. If you're in a dating relationship, commit your relationship to the Lord. Honor him with your relationship. If you're married, commit your marriage to the Lord. I want to make decisions that bless my wife. Make decisions that bless your spouse. Commit them to the Lord. If you're a parent, commit your parenting to the Lord. God, I want to do this in a way that honors you and teaches my children how to live for you. Again, major purchases, commit it to the Lord. Evaluate, God, is this what you want me to do? Is this contributing to the direction of my life? Or is this going to cause me to struggle? Commit your ministry to the Lord. I'm committing my ministry to honor God. So that means all the decisions that I make in reference to ministry are going to honor him. Commit your talent. Commit your gifting to the Lord, and God will establish your plans. You've heard the old saying, fail to plan, plan to fail. This is all about deciding in advance how we're going to live. And I talked about this in tithes, and so I'm not going to talk about it too much more, but a lot of our behavior in church, our behavior in our relationship with God comes down to what we've decided. Have we decided I go to church? Have we decided I'm a tither? Have we decided I worship God? Have we decided I'm a prayer? I read my Bible? So much of how we interact with each other, interact with the house of God, interact with the Lord, it comes down to what we've decided right now. Because, just think about it. Basically, some people have decided, like I said, I don't tithe. Or they've decided, I don't do this or that. I don't do that. So we have to say, Lord, are all of my decisions committed to you? Or are they committed to what I want? What I feel like doing in that moment or that emotion? Are your pre-decisions, are your decisions honoring God? So we can pray and say, God, I want to honor you with all of my decisions. So help me to decide even before Wednesday, even before Sunday night, decide right now, I want to live for you. I'm committing my ways to you. Before you go to work, commit your day to God. Say, Lord, I'm going to be patient. I'm going to be a witness. I'm going to be a positive example. Commit yourself to the Lord. What's the most important thing to you? Let's talk about these values for a moment, and then I'll close. What's the most important thing to you? When you think about your values and how you want to be known, what do you want people to say when they talk about you? What value do you want to really stand out about you? Do you want to be known as I'm generous? Or you want to be known as I'm kind? Or I'm faithful? I want to be known as a man of God or, a woman of God. How do you want to be known? What values do you believe are of the utmost importance in your life? What do you want your reputation to be? Do you want to be known as a person of integrity, a person of purity? You have to clearly define and determine what you want your values to be. And then once you determine your values, your decisions become much easier. And the quality of your decisions determine the quality of your life. So think about this. Think about your values, what you want to be known as, and then evaluate your life and say, is my life going in a direction that would make me be known as the kind of person I want to be known as? Are my decisions contributing to me being known as faithful, pure, dependable, right? Because you decide, what are your values? And then evaluate your life and say, are my decisions contributing to that? Or am I working against the values that I believe in? Do you like the direction your decisions are taking you? Or do you want to change that direction? If you don't like the way your life is going, you've got to make some decisions. And so we're going to do this. We're going to do this today, And we're going to do this over the next couple of weeks. We're going to get a little bit more specific and talk about some things that we need to decide on. But we want to do that right now. We want to commit our ways to the Lord and say, God, I'm committing myself to you. I will make decisions that contribute to that. And you know what I want to say before I tell you to bow your heads? Thank God that Jesus doesn't save us based on the quality of our decisions, right? Thank God. Thank God he's so merciful and he's so compassionate, right? So this isn't about salvation. This is about living a high-quality life as a Christian and a child of God and doing what we know is right, right? So Jesus is so wonderful, so merciful, so compassionate. Anything like this is him just saying, there's a better way of life. Remember, Jesus said, I came to give abundant life. So he's inviting us into a greater way of living that will glorify him and be, again, more meaningful and purposeful for us. So he's not inviting us into this because he's mad at us or he's condemning us. He's inviting us into this so that we can understand and know a new way of living, a way of thriving as a Christian. And before I close, I want to say one more thing. When I was in Charleston, I preached that message that I preached here, do your best. And it's kind of similar in some ways, but this is, again, obviously more focused on decision making. But one of the things that I shared with them, which is kind of an update that I want to share with you. And if you're not aware, I was just talking about, living for Jesus to the best of our ability. 2 Peter chapter 1 talks about this. You can check that out if you missed that sermon. But do your best, And so then one of the things that I said was, I feel like I'm doing my best. I mean, we're in a very difficult situation, but a very good situation. Every time I think about what our church is doing, I feel like we're doing really well. And I think that it shows in the fact that we've got some new people that are coming. We've got a totally different dynamic when it comes to the way that people are so powerfully serving, so invested in this, so diligent to take care of the church and do what needs to be done. You're Levites, and I see you serving, I see you working, I see you being flexible, and I'm like, this is amazing. One of the things that I've seen is, we can set up church in like 15 minutes with like 3 to 5 people. It's unbelievable. And I'm like, we could have church anywhere. We could have church on a mountaintop. We could have church in a community. Wherever we want to do it, we can do it. So it's shown me how incredible you are and how you're willing to serve and invest. And I feel like this is what God wanted to do. God wanted to show each and every one of you how important you are and how you can contribute and that this is a team thing, So I've seen that also our outreaches have had a different dynamic. People are more eager to talk about Jesus. People are more eager to witness. I believe that is directly related to our decisions to step out in faith. And, the other thing about it that I think is cool is we are saving money and we're in a nicer building. Either this one and Pioneer Hall, they're both nicer than our old building. So I feel like we're very blessed. I feel like God is really showing us that this is his will and that he's helping us. I feel like there's a lot of positives that are coming out of this. But anyways, I say all that to say, I feel like I'm doing my best. And I feel like I see people who are also doing their best. And this is the idea. It's like when I step out as a pastor, I say, Lord, I'm going to go for it and I'm going to do my best. And I just got to trust that, my people will too. And then when you all step up and say, I'm right behind you, I'm going to do my best too. I can't tell you how much that means. It's such an incredible blessing to have people that say, I want to do my best also. I just want you to know that I appreciate you. And I was able to share that with Pastor Neil's church. To be able to say, there are people that have said, I'm right behind you. I'm doing my best too. Nobody's perfect. I'm not expecting that. I'm not perfect. But you're just saying, I'm willing to give my best. I'm willing to go for it. My dad, Pastor Neil, he's taking less work so that he's more available to his church, right? That's him saying, I want to do my best, Lord. I want to do my very best. And so when a pastor steps out and says, I'm going to do my best, then we need people who will say, I'm right behind you. I'm doing my best too. I'm going to give to contribute. I work part-time because I trust that the people of God will say, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to give so that you can have more time for the church. I'm doing my best right behind you. So it all works together. I step out and you guys are right there with me. And I know that you are stepping out as well. But I just want to say, I'm honored to be a part of this group. I appreciate you so very much. I feel like God is doing a lot. I feel like God is maturing us. I feel like God is showing us that we're capable and we're able to do what he's called us to do. I mean, I went before Midvale City Council. Some of you were there with me. Thank you for being there. But it's like, and I'm going to do it again. We're in a place where we're growing. We're having to mature. And at the same time, I feel like there's so many positives, so many good things. We have kids downstairs practicing for an Easter play, and we can't hear them. They're totally able to be as loud as they want to be. God is blessing us. God is taking care of things, and we're moving in the right direction. Amen. So again, it all comes down to, will we continue to make these decisions that are God-honoring? Will we commit our ways to God, and then allow him to establish our plans? Let's bow our heads and close our eyes.